Mine is probably, we have, going along with the broken thing, we have sitting in our basement an electric blanket that no longer works. And I have yet to throw it away. Now, it is not a comfortable blanket. It's not like the soft, fluffy one. We have those. So the purpose of the electric one, right, is to plug it in and it makes it hotter. Well, it doesn't work anymore, probably because I don't know, I think I tried to wash it and ruined it somehow. But I did. I followed the my wife's nodding her head. I followed the instructions to a T. It did need to be washed, like, pretty badly. But it doesn't work, so it's useless, right? This blanket is sitting down there. I don't know why I haven't thrown it away yet, honestly. It's not comfortable, so it's useless. It's this electric blanket that doesn't do what it's supposed to do, yet I have it. We don't need it. Now, why am I asking about all these useless items in your home? No, it is not to give you an early jump on your spring cleaning, but maybe this will kick you in that direction. Go ahead. Get rid of things you don't need. I ask because today Jesus is going to talk about something that we have and that we use and that people used in the Old Testament that he's saying we don't really need and honestly doesn't really want us to use. All right, and those are called oaths. Now, if you think about oaths, it's basically when you would swear by something when making a promise or a statement to someone. So we're going to look at that today. We're going to see what were oaths in the Old Testament. Why was Jesus so opposed to all of these, and what are we supposed to do? And what we're going to think about today is this. When it comes to oaths, a yes or no will do, but you have to follow through. So instead of oaths, a yes or no will do, we have to follow through. So that's what we're going to see today. We're going to look at all this stuff and what Jesus says in the passage and figure this out together. It will be Matthew 5 again. We only have, I think, a couple weeks left in chapter 5 of Matthew. We will be verses 33 to 37. They will be up here behind me as always, or on the Bibles on your table if you want to use those. If you are following along and anything else, I'm in the NIV translation as usual. So let's read the whole passage. It's fairly short, and then we'll dig into it and see what we can take about oaths. All right, so Matthew 5, starting with verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to people long ago. So this is, again, how Jesus starts all of these statements. You have heard this, so what the people knew. Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by the earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. All right, so let's first look at oaths in the Old Testament. They were an appeal to God to witness the truth of a statement. So kind of appealing to God for him to witness the truth of what your statement is going to be. And basically, the statement was something you were going to do. Now, they were used in legal and state affairs. They're also used in everyday life. So oaths were fairly common. And they had different formulas. People might swear it as the Lord is my witness, or they might swear by the life of a person, of a king, of their own head, of angels, of anything. People were swearing by a lot of different things. But the teaching itself on oaths that Jesus references when he says, you have heard it said, is Deuteronomy 23:23, which says, whatever your lips utter, you must be sure to do, because you made your vow freely to the Lord your God with your own mouth. So this is what they're taught. Basically, if you make an oath before God, you have to fulfill it. Why? Because if you don't and you swear an oath to God, you're basically profaning God's name. Leviticus 19:12, do not swear falsely by my name, this is God, and so profane the name of your God, I am the Lord. So now what they're doing is this. They're making oaths, but they're being cautioned to not swear by God's name, because if they don't follow through with this oath, they're profaning God's name and using it in vain, which is something they're not supposed to do. So what happened was a thing they called scaling. So scaling oaths became a thing. And this is when you would start swearing by other people. So instead of swearing by God, they might say, I'm going to swear by my wife. I'm going to swear by myself. I'm going to swear by this king or this city. Basically, they were substituting other things for God's name. Now, Jesus doesn't like this. He addresses it later in Matthew. And he says this in Matthew 23, woe to you, blind guides. You say if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. So the problem with this scaling is that it makes oaths more binding than others. So some became more binding, right? It's like you're taking a certain oath more seriously. Like he says, if you just swear by the temple, no big deal. But if you swear by the gold of the temple, then that one was more binding. And Jesus doesn't like this. But we kind of do this, right? We take some things more seriously than something else. Think about, did any of you grow up with, like, what your parents would say as the good china in the house? The good china? Yeah. How often did that good china ever come out? Once, like in your life? Maybe twice, right? You bring that out, right, for like that big important family dinner, big dinner party. But for the regular dinners, meh. Or if you're having somebody really important over, maybe that nice stemware, like the actual crystal glasses come out, not just the fake plastic ones. Like if I'm having something super important over, I would bring out the good china, the good stuff. But if my boy Eugene is just coming over, he might get like, the Target glass or something, right? That's this kind of thing. We're taking some more seriously. I can use Eugene because he wouldn't care. But that's kind of the idea here. Some things become more important than others. Jesus has a huge issue with this. Why? Because this makes honesty not the norm. If some oaths are more binding than others, the ones that scale lower become okay to not follow through on it. In essence, becomes okay to not be honest. And that takes us to part 2 today, which is Jesus' big issue. He basically says if some oaths are more binding than others, it makes words empty. That's his issue. Oaths in and of themselves seem fine. Like it's a promise to want to do something. That when I'm first reading this, I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Like why is it a problem for me to promise or to swear to do something? But Jesus' issue is that not everything will be honest if we scale these oaths, if we swear by different things and not followed through on. That's his issue, is that there's no follow through and it becomes dishonest. And he addresses this in a couple ways. First, he's like, look, whatever you're swearing by, you're in essence swearing by God. God's the creator, so anything we swear by God. Heaven, well, that's where he lives, so that's his throne. Earth, that's where he kicks his feet up down here. That's his footstool. Jerusalem, God's city. Your hair. How many of you when you were born controlled your hair color? Nobody. White, gray. My beard's turning white. I can't control that, all right? That's just the old age. But God controls all of that. So that's what he's saying. Anything we were to swear by would be from God anyway. So what he says is, the second thing, a yes or no should do. Right? It's kind of translated as either say yes, yes, or no, no. So either yes, I'm going to do it. No, I'm not. That's it. It should be simple. Because our natural inclination should be honesty with no qualifiers. We shouldn't have to qualify it. Oaths, in essence, should not be needed. Right? If everyone was just honest as our default, if we were invariably honest, we wouldn't have to swear by things. If I just followed through on all my commitments or things I said I would do, these oaths wouldn't be needed. But hearts have gotten hardened. Sin creeps in. It's real. There's inconsistencies. There's lies. So oaths became this thing that we think we need and can also be potentially harmful. I'm going to demonstrate something else that I think sometimes I need but can also be harmful. Who here knows what this is? Anybody? My wife, she is keyed into this, but what is it? What is? Oh, Lindsay knows.
The sissy bar.
The sissy bar. That is the nice way of saying that. Yeah, so what this is I'm going to get made fun of by my wife and sister-in-law. We'll get to that in a second. This is, in essence, this is a pad you would put on a barbell when you squat, and it would kind of protect your neck, right? So it would kind of come back here and, rest nicely. Well, here's the thing. First off, I get made fun of for being a wuss from my wife and sister-in-law, who, by the way, if you didn't know, were competitive power lifters in high school, so they do have a little bit of cred to back this up when they call me a big wuss. They're like, you shouldn't need it. You should just sit back there on your shoulders, and you should just toughen up if you're going to do it anyway and not use this. So I was like, fine, they're just jealous because they don't squat anymore, and I do, so fine, I'm still going to use it. Oh, I know, I'm going to hear about that later. It's fine. This is all on tape, so I'll hear about it. But then as I did my homework, I'm going to guess, too, don't worry. My dear friend Mark Grace, I think, is watching, and he's probably laughing at me right now, too. But I read on these a little bit, too. Now, here's where they can become harmful. It can actually affect the form, right? It can cause the bar to be too high up or too far down, which can actually hurt me, or it can slide. So this thing can actually be a detriment, right? So it's unnecessary and can be a detriment. So what happens is I should probably throw that away. I'm not going to actually throw it away, but I should, right? And that's the point, is that it can be a hindrance and potentially dangerous. That's what Jesus is saying about oaths. He's saying it further. He says anything other than just yes or no is from the devil. Why? Because they give the opportunity for dishonesty. If we scale that oath and we scale it down really low, it gives us the opportunity to not be truthful about it. And man, that is how the devil likes to creep into things in our lives. Because what? Oaths seem good. They seem like they're from God. So the devil's like, I can weasel in there. I'll slide right up in there and make it seem good, but I'm going to make it bad. And that's why Jesus is like, no, just simplify it. Just say yes or no. Forget the scaling and swearing by the oaths. A simple yes or no should do, because honesty should be our default. So if we're good with that, if we understand what oaths are and that we shouldn't need them, we should just say yes or no. Is that enough? No, because there is the follow-through part. That's part 3. We have to actually follow through and live this out. Right? Following through is simply doing what we say we're going to do, or not do what we say we're not going to do. If we don't follow through, we can't get the intended result. Let's have another fun illustration about this. I need my wife to come up here. This one's going to be really fun. Okay, so we have a T here with a bat. We're all familiar with this, I think. So my wife was also, along with being a competitive powerlifter, quite the softball player and high school softball coach. She's going to demonstrate the importance of follow-through on a swing. Okay, now follow-through is something we talk about in baseball, in golf, in tennis. You have to follow through with whatever you're doing. So if she is trying to rope one out at her brother-in-law way back there, Chris Salmon back there, what happens, let's see, if Stacy swings but doesn't follow through? It only goes that far, and nothing good comes of that. We don't get the intended, boo, yeah, she gets heckled, all that good stuff. We don't get the intended result because she didn't follow through. Now, if she follows through, I'm going to get out of the way, what happens? I'm going to give her another crack at that. You got your heels on. That's the problem. One more try. If she follows through, this tee is also not up to size for her. It's for her. It's our kids. There we go. Hey. Oh, right over the camera. That's going to look good. Look at that. Now, if she follows, give her a hand. She had to come up here and do, yeah, woo. Get that out of there. So if she follows through, we get more of the intended result. She hits the ball farther. It's about follow through. And we get good examples of follow through because God followed through on what he said he was going to do. I love the story in the book of Genesis with God following through on what he promises Abraham. God promises Abraham that he will have an heir. Now, Abraham thinks, well, it can't come from just me and my wife because I'm super old. Abraham's really old this time. His wife, Sarah, is barren. So he's like, she can't have it. But God promises in Genesis 17 that Abraham will have a son by Sarah. He makes this promise. And guess what God does? He follows through because his son, Isaac, was born. God followed through on what he promised. God's words were not empty words. So for us, we need to say what we're going to do and then actually do it. And I think this is a big issue today. I think words have become very empty. Either getting up and speaking them, typing them, anything like that have become an issue. Promises, stances, commitments are made that are not kept. Now, I instantly go to politicians. Every election cycle, how many people do we see get up in front of the camera and on TV say, I'm going to do this, I promise this, if you elect me, this is going to happen. And it's kind of the game to be like, well, there's no way they're going to follow through on those 3. Maybe they'll do that one. But that's become the norm, and that's the problem, is there's not follow through. But we do this too, whether we're up in front of people or not. We might say things that sound good to us. We might say things that make us just feel good. Maybe they make us look good if we say it. Maybe they even make somebody else feel good. But they're just words without the follow through, without the action. They're just empty words. And that's kind of what the issue has become. And think about what it does to someone if we don't follow through with our words. Has anybody ever seen the movie Liar, Liar with Jim Carrey back in the day? Yeah, get some nods. Good. This is kind of the whole premise of this movie, is this. Jim Carrey has a son, and he really doesn't follow through on whatever he tells his son he's going to do. Like, he just doesn't show up for times with him. He doesn't take him where he says he's going to take him. And it kind of culminates in his son's birthday party, where Jim Carrey is supposed to be there, and he doesn't show up. And there's that scene where his kid is just sitting there looking so sad and disheveled. And they sing the song, and his mom says, just blow out the candles, make a wish. And as he blows him out, he wishes that his dad could no longer tell a lie. And then we have the whole rest of the movie where he can't lie. That's how we have the whole movie. But it's that look on the kid's face when his dad isn't following through. All right, so that's the issue, is follow through. When we make a commitment and we don't follow through, it can hurt ourselves, it can hurt others. So when we say we're going to do something, we need to follow through and do it. But this also goes the other direction. All right, this goes to not doing things we say we're not going to do. All right, so not doing the things we say we're not going to do. God does this also. In Deuteronomy 31:8, it says, "The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." God will never leave you nor forsake you. God is making the promise to never do something. I love how this plays out in the book of Acts with Paul, later in Acts. So what's going on late in Acts is Paul has been arrested being a missionary. He is accused and arrested for teaching against the Jewish law. Some are claiming he's bringing Greek people into the Jewish temple, which is a huge no-no, by the way. He's incited riots and all this kind of stuff. So he is in some legal trouble. So he goes on trial before a couple different governors, some kings hear his case, and eventually Paul appeals all the way to Caesar in Rome, because Paul's a Roman citizen. He has a right to do this, so he appeals to Caesar. So the only way to travel at this time, he's not near Rome, is to set sail on a ship. So in Acts 27, he sets sail with a bunch of others for Rome. And eventually they're trying to figure out where they're going to winter, where they have to come into port, and they keep sailing, even though Paul says they shouldn't, and they hit a nasty storm. This crazy storm breaks out, and they're throwing things overboard. They're not sure what's going to happen. Everybody thinks it's going to be lost. But Paul says to them in Acts 27, 23, and 24, "Last night an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you.'" God didn't leave or abandon Paul in this storm. He promised Paul he would stand trial in Rome, and he kept that promise, and he also didn't leave him or forsake him, just like the promise came earlier. Other rough stuff happened to Paul. Paul didn't have all this great life, but he was never left or forsaken. God kept the promise to not do something. There's an old classic song that kind of references this kind of similar point. The great rocker Meatloaf, who recently passed away. I'm very familiar with Meatloaf. Yeah. So how about the song? "And I would do anything for love." Finish the lyric. Thanks, Ryan. Wow. I was thinking we might get a little more participation, but that's okay. Yeah, but I won't do that, is how it finishes. So if you look at the song, and people are like, what does he mean? Well, there's a whole ton of verses in the song. It's really long. But there's at the end of the verses, there's these things that he says that he won't do. And some of them are just, never forget the way you feel. I'll never stop dreaming of you every night of my life. I'll never see that it's time to move on. So he says all these things, and I won't do that. So he's going to follow through on promises to not do something. And that's what the whole song is kind of based on. God does that when he promises to never leave us or abandon us. So we need to keep our promises and follow through with what we say we're going to do and what we say we're not going to do. It's not an option, which is in essence the problem with these oaths, is that if we scale them, if we try to say, oh, this one's not a big deal, this one is, we make it okay to not be honest. And that is Jesus' big issue. In the kingdom of God, honesty is mandated. Honesty is what's expected. It is a kingdom of honesty, and that's what he wants, and that became the issue with oaths. Honesty and sincerity shouldn't be a rarity. It should be the norm. So to make it the norm. So this week, think about what you say to people, the promises or statements you make, whether that's with your families, with your kids, with your friends, at work, and think about the follow-through. You know, if you promise your boss you're going to do something, and you also promise maybe you have somebody that reports to you at work you're going to do something, are you treating those the same way? Are those things you're both going to follow through? Am I going to follow through the same with my kids when I promise them something in the same way I would with anybody else? So take care to follow through with either your yes or your no. Make sure they're not empty words. Remember that God always follows through for us with what he's promised. The Bible is full of his promises that he does not break. So when we make a statement, when we make a promise, when we're saying something to somebody, we don't need to swear by anything. We don't need to qualify it. We shouldn't have to. Let your follow-through be what shows how you're honest. The follow-through becomes what makes it great. Just say yes or no and follow through. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this morning. And again, for just more teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, God, and that we have Jesus as our teacher. And God, I pray that we would be reminded that honesty is the norm you desire. It's how you set things up, God. It's how you created us to be honest. There's no other way. God, that when we make a statement or a promise, we don't need to swear it by anything, God, but just to follow through. God, as Christians and as people that follow you, that would be our norm. So, God, I pray this week that in whatever our life situations are, whenever we make a statement or say something to somebody, that we would really consider that we're going to follow through on what we say we're going to do or what we're not going to do, that it wouldn't be something we take lightly, that words wouldn't become empty, but there would be follow through. So, God, I thank you again for these words, for this teaching, and for today that we come together like this. In your name, God.